What if I told you that every time a man touches a woman, he's not just seeking pleasure, he's offering a prayer from a wounded place he doesn't even know exists? It's not in his words, it's in the silence after, not in his strength, but in what trembles behind it. Most men don't understand what they're truly longing for. They chase bodies, experiences, moments, but what their soul is really chasing is witnessing, to be seen, to be felt, to be known even in the places they've learned to hide from everyone, including themselves. Desire for many is not the fire of instinct. It is the echo of abandonment. The first time a boy felt invisible, the first time love was earned, not given, the first time strength became a mask. So he grows. He becomes a man. He learns how to perform, how to impress, how to please, how to conquer. But under the armor, the boy still waits, quiet, forgotten, hungry. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And nowhere is this more true than in a man's relationship with intimacy. We think we're choosing our partners, but often it's our shadow choosing for us. The part of us that feels incomplete, that still aches for a mother's affirmation, that turns women into saviors, sex into therapy, and validation into oxygen. And so the bedroom becomes a battlefield, not of bodies, but of souls. Because in that vulnerable moment when the skin softens and the eyes close, something deeper awakens. Not lust, not dominance, but memory, pain, yearning, a wordless prayer. Please let this mean I'm enough. And if that yearning isn't met with presence, if we are not conscious of who we are merging with and why, then sex becomes a form of self-erasure. You leave more empty than when you entered. You give what was sacred and receive only the illusion of closeness. But there's another way, one far older than performance, one far deeper than conquest. What if intimacy wasn't about being good enough but being whole? What if the male body wasn't a tool but a temple? And what if real pleasure, the kind that leaves you fuller, not emptier, was only possible when you stop chasing love outside and start meeting the woman within? In the next part of this video, we'll journey into the forgotten terrain of male desire, not as a biological impulse, but as a psychological wound, a spiritual map and a mirror of the soul. Because to understand male desire is to understand the silent war between the boy and the man, between shadow and soul, between the one who begs to be chosen and the one who learns to choose himself. Let's begin. They told him desire was about biology, about release, about need, about being a man. But what no one ever told him, what culture never dared to whisper, was that the thing he hungered for wasn't in her body. It was in her gaze, in the soft yes that echoed through her presence. You are seen. You are enough. Desire is the skin of something far older, far deeper. It is not born in the body. It is born in the soul. In the quiet ache between longing and shame, a man discovers a mirror. And what he sees there isn't lust, it's absence. Absence of nurturing, absence of self, absence of a place where he could lay down his armor and be touched, not for what he achieves, but for who he is beneath the noise. Many men don't consciously know this hunger, but it shapes their choices. They reach for bodies like someone reaching in the dark for a match, not to conquer, to feel alive, to feel chosen. Because somewhere in their inner landscape, the boy is still waiting for a mother, for a lover, for anyone to finally look at him and say, "You are safe here. You can stop performing now." But the world teaches men to run from that ache, to cover it in ego humor, bravado, or endless pursuits. So instead of feeling it, they perform over it. They become excellent lovers, technique masters. They learn how to read her breath, how to impress, how to chase the climax, but few ever learn how to be present, how to let themselves be seen. Because being seen requires risk that the mask might fall, risk that underneath there's something unlovable. And this Jung called the shadow. The parts of us that we hide, repress, and deny, usually formed in childhood, shaped by wounds too sacred to name. In intimacy, this shadow doesn't disappear. It becomes the stage. Every touch, every silence, every moment of withdrawal or overgiving, it's the shadow trying to speak. Carl Jung didn't see the body as a machine. He saw it as a sacred text, an oracle that speaks the language of the unconscious. So when a man enters a woman unconsciously without presence, he's not just making love, he's also reenacting ancient scripts embedded in his psyche. Scripts about worth rejection, abandonment. Scripts about power control and being needed. He thinks he's giving pleasure, but he's often begging for a reflection. He thinks he's chasing ecstasy, but he's often trying to feel whole for just a few seconds. That's why for so many men, the moment after sex is not joy, but collapse. A sudden emptiness, a loss of self, a subtle shame that whispers, "Why do I still feel lonely?" Because he gave something sacred without receiving something sacred in return. Because he merged bodies without first merging presence. And most painfully because he thought desire would quiet the wound. But desire only reveals it. In every man who rushes toward intimacy without intention, there's often a hidden child behind the curtain, watching, waiting, aching. This child doesn't want sex. He wants to be held. He doesn't want intensity. He wants security. He doesn't want applause. He wants quiet love that does not need to be earned. But when that child is unseen, he hijacks adult desire. He turns every woman into a mother, every encounter into a performance, every unmet expectation into bitterness. That's why Jung wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parent." And many men now, adults, still carry the unlived pain of their childhood selves, projecting it into every relationship, every bed, every breathless moment of connection that ends in disconnection. It is not their fault, but it is their responsibility. Because if the inner boy does not learn how to grieve, the adult man will keep trying to seduce what he was never given. There is a moment in a man's life when the performance no longer works. The body no longer lies. The soul aches too loud to ignore. He feels a weariness not of muscles but of meaning. And he begins to ask, who am I when I'm not being impressive? What am I offering in intimacy if not my truth? What am I afraid she'll see if I let my guard down? This is the threshold Jung called the individuation process, when a man begins the journey not outward but inward, toward wholeness, toward the reclamation of parts once buried, toward sacred masculine energy that no longer begs but invites. And here's the paradox: real pleasure only begins when performance ends, when the man stops trying to be enough and begins to be real. Then and only then does sex become what it was always meant to be, not an escape but a return, not a mask but a mirror, not conquest but communion. If any of this has stirred something in you, if you've ever walked away from intimacy feeling more empty than full, if you've ever sensed that your body knows something your mind hasn't yet understood, you are not alone. There is a quiet revolution happening. Men are waking up, not in anger, not in shame, but in curiosity, in hunger, in the wild need to finally meet themselves without judgment. We are building something here together, a space where men can speak truth without bravado, where desire is honored, not shamed, where the sacred meets the sexual, where soul meets skin. In the comments, tell us what part of this story felt like yours. This is not a monologue, it's a mirror. Let's see each other. And if this speaks to your soul, subscribe. Join the movement. This is not just about sex. This is about who you are when no one's watching. In the next section, we will go even deeper. We'll explore why unconscious sex can open portals that drain your soul and how to develop the energetic discernment to protect your life force. Because not every woman deserves access to your body, and not every touch is sacred. Let's continue. You've come too far to turn away now. There are men who fall in love with women they barely know, not because of who she is, but because of what she awakens. She touches something unspoken, something ancient, and in that touch he feels alive again. But this is not love. It is possession, not by her, but by his own unconscious feminine, the Anima. Carl Jung taught that every man carries within him an image of the woman, not a specific woman, but a psychic feminine imprint, fluid, emotional, sensual, mysterious. She lives in his dreams, his projections, his longings. She whispers in his desires. She shows up not in the real woman, but in the woman he sees through her. This is the Anima. She is not the partner. She is the mirror. And when a man does not know this, when he is unconscious of this inner figure, he does not meet a woman. He meets his own soul in disguise. The Anima is not dangerous in herself. She is a bridge to creativity, to emotion, to intuition. But when she is unconscious, when a man has not yet integrated her, she becomes a seductress of the psyche. He falls for fantasy. He becomes emotionally enmeshed. He expects the outer woman to carry the emotional weight of his inner world. Suddenly, her silence feels like betrayal. Her independence feels like abandonment. Her boundary feels like rejection. Why? Because the man is no longer relating to her. He's relating to his inner child's unmet needs projected onto her form. This is anima possession. She becomes the goddess and the destroyer, the mother and the temptress, the muse and the demon, all at once. And when she inevitably disappoints, because no real woman can hold the weight of a man's unlived soul, he turns to resentment, detachment, or collapse. Not because she failed, but because he asked her to carry something that was never hers. Underneath anima possession often lies a deeper root, the mother complex. This is not about blaming mothers. It's about the psychic imprint formed in early childhood, when a boy's first bond with the feminine is fused with dependency, survival, and longing. If the mother was overbearing, unavailable, emotionally erratic, or even too nurturing, something fractures. The boy doesn't develop his own emotional center. He remains psychically fused to the mother long after he becomes a man. He may look independent, he may sleep with many women, he may build an empire, but deep inside he is still searching for home in the eyes of every woman he touches. This is why he clings to relationships that suffocate him, or why he runs from the one woman who truly sees him, or why he sabotages intimacy the moment it begins to feel too real. He is not afraid of her. He is afraid of what she mirrors, his unlived self. The wounded mother in his psyche becomes either the woman he must please or the woman he must avoid. One man becomes a chronic nice guy, always available, always pleasing, always overgiving, secretly hoping to be chosen. Another becomes the rebel, the avoidant, the lone wolf avoiding connection, but deeply lonely. Both are trapped, not by women, but by the unintegrated feminine within. Jung said a man who is possessed by the anima is always subject to mood's unpredictable behavior, illusions about women, and emotional confusion. Until he meets her within, he will project her without. He will not see the woman in front of him. He will see his wound. So how does a man break free? Not by rejecting women, not by avoiding desire, but by going inward, meeting his own anima. This means learning to feel what he once suppressed, to grieve the mother he never had or the one who gave too much, to differentiate the outer woman from the inner figure, to reclaim the emotions he gave away in exchange for love. He begins to ask, is this love or is this longing? Do I desire her or do I desire to be seen? Am I here or is my shadow doing the talking? And slowly, painfully, beautifully, he begins to reclaim the parts of himself he once scattered into others. This is the alchemical marriage, not between two people, but between the masculine and feminine within. Let this be spoken plainly. No woman can save you. She can witness, she can reflect, she can invite, but she cannot heal the boy inside you. She cannot give you the love you refuse to give yourself. She cannot mother your soul. You must meet her, not as the boy seeking comfort, but as the man rooted in presence. Only then can you touch her, without losing yourself. Only then can you give, without needing her to fill your emptiness. Only then can you merge, without disappearing. This is sacred masculinity, not rigid, not performative, but raw, real, awake. If this resonates, if something in you feels pierced not by shame but by truth, then speak. In the comments, share your story. Not the polished one, the real one. We are not here to compete. We are here to remember. That manhood was never about domination. It was always about integration. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are awakening. Subscribe, stay, return. Because this is not just a channel, it's a fire around which the new masculine gathers. In the next part, we'll go deeper into energetic intimacy, why sex can sometimes drain your clarity, strength, and soul, and how to develop the discernment to know which energies align with your healing and which ones pull you back into ancestral patterns. Because the sacred masculine doesn't just feel, he chooses with consciousness. Let's walk further together. Every man carries within him the scars of his unlived truths. Some are obvious trauma, loss, abandonment. Others are subtle neglect, dressed as independence love offered with conditions. But the shadow is only made of pain. It's made of all the parts he was never allowed to be. The soft boy, the angry boy, the insecure, tender, emotional, imaginative boy. The boy who needed to cry but was told to fight, who wanted to be held but was taught to chase. Jung wrote, the shadow is everything about ourselves we do not want to be. And when that shadow isn't faced, when a man denies what hurts, what hungers, what feels too raw, he doesn't bury it. He carries it forward, he brings it into his relationships, and without knowing it, he hands it to the woman standing in front of him. Shadow projection is not a theory. It's a daily event. It happens when a man looks at a woman and does not see her but sees a mirror for his unhealed past. If he feels abandoned, hell interpret her independence as betrayal. If he feels unseen, hell need her attention like oxygen. If he fears not being good enough, hell resent her standards. If he hides his anger, hell call her too emotional. If he buries his chaos, hell be drawn to hers. It is not her, it's his shadow using her image to speak. She becomes the canvas for everything he hasn't made conscious, the container for his pain, the reason for his suffering, the excuse for his rage. And this is where so many relationships collapse, not because they were doomed, but because they were unconscious. When a man is possessed by shadow projection, he no longer relates to the woman as a person, he relates to her as an archetype. She becomes the mother he could never please, or the lover who finally saves him, or the enemy who threatens his ego, or the muse who makes him feel worthy again. But here's the brutal truth. The moment you project your shadow onto someone, you rob them of their humanity. You don't see them, you use them. And this is not love. This is emotional colonization, asking someone to carry what we refuse to hold. In the early stages, this feels like obsession. The man is in love. She is perfect, divine, unlike anyone else. He places her on a pedestal. But pedestals are not sacred. They are prisons. Because the moment she acts human, disappoints him, disagrees, sets a boundary, the illusion shatters. And the very man who once worshipped her now resents her. Why? Because she failed to be who his shadow needed her to be. And so love turns to bitterness. Tenderness turns to blame. Desire turns to contempt. Not because of her, because the projection collapsed. And now he must either face himself or find a new woman to project onto. What we reject within, we attract without. That is the silent law of the psyche. So long as a man refuses to face his emotional truth, he will keep meeting it in the form of others. Hell say, why do I keep attracting unavailable women? But the deeper question is, what part of me is still unavailable to my own truth? Hell say, why do they always leave? But maybe it's not that they leave. Maybe it's that he never fully arrives. Jung taught that projection is the first stage of a relationship, but it is meant to be outgrown. Only when we withdraw the projection do we truly meet the other. To stop projecting is not to stop feeling. It is to ask, what am I really reacting to? Where have I felt this before? Is this her or my history? This is where real healing begins. When a man stops blaming, stops fixing, stops analyzing her, and instead turns inward, he begins to reclaim his projections. Not to punish himself, but to take responsibility for his soul. And then he sees her, not as savior, not as villain, but as a woman, real, complex, sacred. This is love after projection. Not fantasy, but truth. If you've ever blamed her for what you wouldn't face in yourself, welcome. You're not the only one. This space is for men who are done performing, who are tired of repeating, who want to learn the language of their soul, not just their body. This is where the masculine awakens. Drop a comment, share what projection you're starting to recognize. We don't heal in isolation, we heal in reflection. Subscribe, not just for more content, but for reminders that this work is sacred. You're not broken, you're becoming. In the next part, we'll explore what Jung called the individuation process. How facing your shadow not only transforms your relationships, but reconnects you with your lost purpose, energy, and soul direction. Because there's something waiting for you beyond projection. And it begins where you least expect it, inside the wound you've been running from. Let's keep going. You've already started the return? Every collapse carries an invitation. When the projection shatters, when the illusion dies, when the woman no longer fits the fantasy, something deeper begins to stir. Pain becomes a portal. And for the first time, the man no longer looks outward for rescue. He begins the descent into the underworld of the self, into the roots of his longing, into the forgotten territory Jung called individuation. This is not healing in the modern sense. It is not about fixing what is wrong. It is about becoming what was never fully born. However, the night sea journey. In mythology, the hero journeys outward to slay the dragon to win the treasure. But Jung reminded us the greatest journey is inward. It is the night sea voyage, the descent into the unconscious, where the man faces not enemies, but himself. And this journey always begins at the threshold of despair, when sex no longer satisfies, when power no longer fulfills, when love becomes a battlefield, when the old ways no longer work. This is not failure, this is initiation. The gods have gone silent. The ego collapses. And what rises in its place is not certainty, but curiosity. Who am I beneath what I perform? Who am I when there's nothing left to prove? What is this ache that nothing external can seem to touch? Individuation is Jung's word for the journey of becoming whole. It is the slow, often painful process of reclaiming the scattered pieces of yourself, the shadow, the inner child, the feminine, the rage, the dreams, the soul. It is not about becoming better, it is about becoming real. Most men were never taught this path. They were taught to conquer, to provide, to perform, but few were taught to descend, to feel, to integrate, to listen to the voice beneath the voice. And that voice is ancient. It carries memories. It knows what you forgot. It whispers not what you should do, but what you were born to do. As the man begins to walk the path of individuation, he starts to notice something. His reactions soften. His projections lessen. His energy stabilizes. Why? Because he no longer fears the parts of himself he once buried. He no longer avoids his sadness. He sits with it. He no longer runs from his anger. He listens to it. He no longer hides his sensitivity. He honors it. And in doing so, he becomes trustworthy not just to others, but to himself. The warrior becomes the sage. The seducer becomes the steward. The lost boy becomes the man who knows who he is. Masculine energy, when integrated, is not about control. It's about holding space. It doesn't dominate. It anchors. It doesn't seek to be admired. It seeks to see clearly. It doesn't fear emotion. It makes room for it. The integrated man no longer needs validation. He is not immune to desire, but he is no longer ruled by it. He chooses carefully, not because he is afraid to lose himself, but because he has finally found himself. His sexuality becomes sacred. His presence becomes medicine. His silence becomes sanctuary. If you are hearing this, something in you is already waking. A knowing, a remembering, a hunger for truth that cannot be numbed by shallow pleasure or endless achievement. This is your moment. Not to be perfect, not to have all the answers, but to become available to your own soul. You don't have to do it alone. There are others, men walking the same path, making the same descent, returning from the same dark night. This is your brotherhood, not one of bravado, but of inner fire. Leave a comment below. Tell us what part of your journey you are reclaiming. Your voice might be the one another man needs to hear tonight. Subscribe not for more noise, but for more remembrance. You are not here to perform. You are here to awaken. In the final part of this journey, we will return to where it all began. Sex, desire, the soul. But this time we will see it with new eyes. Not as hunger, but as ritual. Not as escape, but as return. You've done the descent. Now, it's time to rise. Let's finish the journey together. What if your body was never just flesh, but memory? What if every intimate act was a whisper from the soul, a doorway into something ancient, mystical, terrifying, and true? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." But what happens when your unconscious speaks through desire? When sex becomes the very language through which your soul cries out to be seen? Not every man is ready to answer that call. Because to enter a woman's body unconsciously is one thing, but to enter her soul with awareness is a sacred task, one that demands presence, integrity, and the courage to feel. Let this be spoken plainly. Sex is not an act. It is an exchange. Every kiss carries intention. Every touch transfers memory. Every climax opens a portal. But if the man is asleep, lost in performance, detached from presence, that portal becomes a wound. He leaves the bed feeling drained. Not because of her, but because he offered himself without being fully in himself. He gave away fragments of his soul in exchange for a moment of validation. He touched her skin, but abandoned his own truth. This is the epidemic of unconscious sex men using pleasure to run from pain, using women to avoid meeting themselves. The body is not just a tool of pleasure, it is a symbolic vessel, a living scripture of all we carry. And in the act of sex, the unconscious becomes loud. That childhood rejection, that need to be chosen, that fear of inadequacy, that ache for love you didn't have the words for. It all arrives in that one touch, in the silence after climax, in the emptiness that follows an encounter that promised connection, but delivered confusion. This is not weakness. This is the truth of the soul begging to be felt. No woman can meet you more deeply than you've met yourself. If you approach her body with unresolved hunger, you will drink her energy like a man dying of thirst, and still remain thirsty. But when you arrive in presence rooted clear open, you no longer seek to take. You begin to offer. Your gaze becomes steady. Your hands become prayers. Your voice becomes invitation. You're no longer chasing release. You're communing with the sacred. For centuries, men were taught the female body is sacred, but few were taught that their own body is also a temple, that their seed is not casual, that their presence is not disposable, that their energy deserves to be protected. Not every woman deserves access to your soul, not because you are arrogant, but because you are finally awake. You are not here to lose yourself in chaos. You are here to channel your life force toward creation. You do not owe your body to every touch that offers comfort. Your body is the home of your purpose, your essence, your future children, your divine mission. And that body deserves reverence. When you sleep with a woman, you are not just touching her, you are merging with her unconscious. You engage her past lovers, her unspoken wounds, her unprocessed trauma, her ancestral lineage. And if you are not grounded, you take that energy into your own psyche. Suddenly you feel lost, fatigued, disoriented, and you don't know why. Because sex is not just exchange of pleasure, it's an exchange of patterns. This is why discernment is sacred, not fear, not repression, but inner clarity. Ask, is this union aligned with my soul, or am I feeding an old wound with a new body? The world taught men how to perform, how to satisfy a woman, how to last longer, go harder, be impressive. But sacred sex begins with presence, not performance. To touch her soul, you must have already touched your own. To receive her depth, you must have descended into yours. To open her heart, you must have unguarded yours. This is not about being perfect. It is about being real. You don't need more tricks. You need more truth. If you've ever left a sexual encounter feeling more empty than fulfilled, this message is for you. You're not broken. You're waking up. There is a new way, not one of avoidance, but of sacred fire. A path where sex is not a coping mechanism, but a ritual. Where your desire is not shameful, but divine. Where your body is not a weapon, but a bridge. This is what we're building here. Drop into the comments. Tell us, what truth about your sexuality are you reclaiming? Not to impress, but to unmask. This is your tribe. This is your initiation. Subscribe, not to escape, but to embody. In the final part of this journey, we'll return to the center, your soul. We'll explore how the reclamation of desire's shadow and presence leads not just to better sex, but to a fuller life. To a man who walks with purpose, loves with depth, and lives without mass. The final step is not a technique. It is a surrender, a return, a resurrection. Stay with us. Your soul has something left to say. There comes a moment in every man's journey when the masks fall quietly. Not with noise, not in a grand collapse, but in stillness. He wakes before dawn. The world is silent, and he can finally hear what's been whispering for years. You are not what you perform. You are what you remember, not remember in thought, but in soul. You remember that once, long before you learned to seduce, to protect, to chase, you were simply present, alive, feeling open, and maybe, just maybe, it's time to return. When you strip away performance technique ego, what remains? A man, naked not in body, but in being. One who sees that desire was never the problem, it was the doorway. A portal to his depth, a bridge back to his softness, an invitation to reclaim what the world told him to forget. This is not the end of the sexual journey. It's the beginning of ritual intimacy, where presence becomes prayer, where your gaze is a gift, where your body is no longer an escape but a return. He does not rush, he does not chase, he does not beg to be chosen, because he has chosen himself. And from that place his love is clean. Not perfect but whole, not intense but grounded, not desperate but devotional. He does not use sex to silence his wounds. He uses love to hear them. And in doing so, he becomes not just a lover, but a mirror of truth. If some part of this journey awakens something in you, a memory, a wound of fire, let it speak. Drop into the comments, not as a confession, but as a declaration you are waking up. Tell us, what part of your sexuality, your soul, yourself are you reclaiming? There are men who need your voice to find theirs. There are women who need to see the sacred masculine rise. There is a younger version of you still watching silently, who needs to know that healing is not only possible, it's already begun. A remembrance of something the soul never forgot. That love was never meant to be earned. That pleasure was never meant to be numb. That strength was never meant to hide softness. This channel is not just content. It is a sanctuary, a place to remember. Subscribe not for entertainment, but for initiation. Each video is a ritual. Each word is a mirror. Each silence, a doorway. And you're invited to walk through. There's a line Jung wrote that echoes through the soul. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now, as this journey closes, as the screen fades, as you sit in the quiet after the storm, ask yourself, who are you? When no one is watching, what is the man you were born to be trying to tell you? The journey continues, not out there, but in here. We'll meet you again on the next step inward. Until then, guard your energy, honor your presence, make love a ritual, and above all, remember, you are not alone, not anymore.